The glass doors of the Grand Meridian Hotel slid open at exactly 7:43 in the morning, and the November wind came in with them, cold, sharp, carrying the smell of exhaust and something fried from the cart on the corner of Michigan Avenue. Nobody noticed the boy slip in behind a family with luggage. He was small for 11, with a gray knit cap pulled down over his ears and a jacket 2 sizes too big, the kind you find at the church sale on the last Sunday of the month when everything's half off and you still have to count the coins twice. He carried a paper bag tucked under one arm. Inside it, 4 biscuits wrapped in foil that the woman at St. Augustine's had pressed into his hands before the breakfast line ended that morning. His name was Emmett. He didn't come to steal anything. He came because the cold outside was the kind that gets into your joints and stays there, and he'd learned that hotel lobbies in downtown Chicago will let you sit in a chair near the window for about 20 minutes before someone comes to ask. 20 minutes of warmth. That was the plan. He picked a chair near the tall windows overlooking the street. The lobby was all marble and cream and golden light. A pianist somewhere behind a partition was playing something low and pretty. Emmett sat down, tucked the paper bag on his lap, and watched the revolving doors. On the 41st floor, in the corner suite with a view of Lake Michigan, a man named Douglas Farrow was already on his 3rd call of the morning, and it wasn't yet 8 o'clock. He was 61, broad-shouldered in the way men get when they've spent decades in boardrooms where posture is currency. His hair had gone silver at the temples 10 years ago, and he'd kept it because someone once told him it made him look distinguished, and he believed them. He wore the same kind of suit he'd worn since 1998 because when something works, you don't change it. That was his philosophy about most things. He paced while he talked. The lake lay flat and gray beyond the window, the kind of gray that promises snow by afternoon. "I need the numbers by noon," he said into the phone. "Not 2 o'clock. Noon. There's a difference." He ended the call without waiting for a response. Douglas Farrow had built Farrow Capital from a rented office in Naperville with 2 employees and a second-hand copier. Now it occupied 3 floors of a building on Wacker Drive and managed assets that required a spreadsheet most people would never understand. He was, by every metric available, a success. He was also, in the way that successful men sometimes are, deeply alone. His daughter, Sylvia, hadn't returned his last 4 calls. His doctor had told him 3 weeks ago that the inflammation in his left knee would require surgery if he kept refusing the injections, and he kept refusing the injections. His executive assistant had quit in October, and the temp agency kept sending him people who flinched when he raised his voice, which he considered a fundamental incompatibility. He was in Chicago for 2 days to meet with a pension fund manager named Gerald, who liked long lunches and longer conversations, and who Douglas was already dreading. He needed coffee, real coffee, not the pod machine in the suite. He put on his coat and took the elevator down. The lobby had filled a little by the time Douglas crossed it toward the hotel restaurant. He moved the way he always moved, direct, no deviation, as if the path between himself and wherever he was going had already been cleared. He almost walked past the boy, but then the boy did something unusual. He held out the paper bag, not to Douglas specifically, just out, in the general direction of anyone who might be passing. A small arm extended, a crinkled bag, and a voice that was trying to be steady but wasn't quite there yet. "Excuse me, would you like a biscuit?" Douglas stopped. He looked at the boy the way he looked at most unexpected things, with a flicker of irritation, then a kind of narrow assessment. The boy looked back. He had dark eyes, very direct, and a small smear of something on his jacket collar that might have been jelly or might have been paint. He was clearly not a hotel guest. The staff must not have noticed him yet, or hadn't gotten around to moving him along. "A biscuit," Douglas said. "Yes, sir. They're from St. Augustine's. The lady puts butter inside before she folds them. I'm going to breakfast, I know. I just thought." The boy hesitated. His arm lowered slightly. Sometimes people are hungry before they get to sit down. Douglas stared at him for a moment. "What are you doing in here?" The boy's chin came up just a fraction. Staying warm. There was no apology in it, no defensiveness either, just a plain fact, stated plainly. Douglas had been lied to by people who ran billion-dollar companies. He could spot it in about 6 seconds. This child was not lying. "Where are your parents?" The boy was quiet for a moment. "My grandma's at work. She cleans offices on the north side. She doesn't get back until 3. And your parents? Another pause, shorter this time, in the way that people pause when they've learned to move through a hard thing quickly. It's just me and my grandma. Douglas looked at him for another long moment, then he looked at the bag. How many biscuits in there? 4. Keep them, Douglas said, and turned toward the restaurant. He'd taken about 7 steps when he heard the boy's voice again, quiet and not directed at him, the way kids sometimes talk to themselves without meaning to be heard. I hope his day gets better. Douglas didn't turn around. He kept walking. He sat down at a table by the window and ordered his coffee and his eggs and opened his phone to the email that had come in from Gerald's office, which was already rescheduling the afternoon meeting. But the sentence followed him to the table. I hope his day gets better. He didn't go back to his room after breakfast. He had 2 hours before his 10 o'clock call, and something about the lobby, the low music, the warm light, the absence of anyone demanding anything from him, made him take his coffee to one of the chairs near the window and sit. The boy was still there. He'd moved to a chair closer to the radiator, and he had the paper bag open now, eating one of the biscuits in small, careful bites, watching the revolving doors with the quiet attention of someone who finds the world interesting just as it is. Douglas watched him for a while before he said anything. You do this often? Come in here. The boy looked over, unsurprised. About twice a week. When it's cold, and they let you. Nobody's asked me to leave yet. He said it matter-of-factly. I'm quiet and I don't touch anything. Douglas looked at the biscuit. You're giving away your breakfast. I only need 1. The boy folded the top of the bag over carefully. My grandma says when you have something, you share what you can. Even if it's not much. Smart woman, she is. The boy said it with a simplicity that was its own kind of testimony. Douglas sat with his coffee. The pianist had started up again, something he almost recognized. What's your name? Emmett. Douglas. Emmett nodded, as if this were a reasonable thing to share with a stranger in a hotel lobby. He went back to watching the doors. After a minute, Douglas said, You're not in school today. It's a teacher work day. He tilted his head slightly. Are you not working today? Douglas blinked. I'm always working, but you're sitting here. There was no accusation in it. Just the same plain observation he'd offered before, the way someone notes that the sky is overcast. I have a call at 10, Douglas said. What do you do? I manage money. Other people's money. Emmett considered this. Do you like it? The question landed differently than it should have. People asked Douglas many things. They asked what his returns were, what his outlook was for the next quarter, what sectors he was watching, what he thought about rates. Nobody asked if he liked it. Not anymore. Maybe not ever, in a long time. I'm good at it, he said. Emmett seemed to understand that this was not the same as an answer, but he didn't push. He took another small bite of his biscuit. My grandma doesn't like cleaning offices, he said. She likes gardening. She has window boxes. He paused. She does the offices, so we have rent. Douglas said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. Or there was too much, and he didn't know how to start. His 10 o'clock call ran long, and by the time he was back in the lobby at 11:30, he expected the boy to be gone. He wasn't. Emmett was sitting at the same chair, and he had a book open on his lap. A library book, the plastic cover sticker still on the spine. He was reading with the same focused quiet he'd brought to everything else. Douglas sat down across from him without entirely deciding to. You're still here? It's warm, Emmett said without looking up. Then, after a moment, also I wanted to finish this chapter. What are you reading? Emmett held the cover up. It was a book about ocean navigation, that's the kind of thing Douglas would not have predicted because sailors used to cross oceans with just stars and math, Emmett said. No GPS, no weather apps, just looking up and thinking. He turned a page. I think that's brave. Douglas thought about Gerald, who used 5 analysts and a Bloomberg terminal to make decisions he was never fully confident in. It is brave, he said. Emmett looked at him then, and there was something in his expression, not surprise exactly, more like the careful noting of something unexpected. My teacher says I read above my grade level, Emmett said. She put me in the advanced group, but I don't tell kids at school because they get weird about it. Kids get weird about a lot of things. Adults too, Emmett said. Douglas almost smiled. He couldn't remember the last time he'd almost smiled at something someone said. He had Gerald's lunch at noon. He should go upstairs and review the deck his analyst had put together. He stayed. Over the next hour, in the way that conversations sometimes grow without being planned, Emmett told him things. That his grandmother, whose name was Vera. He said it with a kind of reverence, the way you say the name of something important, had come to Chicago from Mississippi when she was 19, with one suitcase and an address written on a piece of paper. That she had worked cleaning jobs for 40 years and never once complained, not in front of Emmett anyway. Though sometimes at night he heard her praying in the kitchen, and the prayers had a tired sound. That Emmett's mother had been Vera's daughter, Colette, who had died when Emmett was 3, and that Emmett kept a photograph of her in the inside pocket of his backpack, which he carried everywhere. That his favorite thing in the whole city was the Shed Aquarium, which he had visited twice on school trips and thought was the closest thing he'd ever seen to another world. That he wanted to be a marine biologist when he grew up, or maybe a navigator, or maybe both. Douglas listened. He was, by temperament and by habit, a man who talked more than he listened. 40 years in business had trained him that way. Presence was dominance, silence was concession. But sitting across from this boy in a hotel lobby on a Tuesday morning in November, he found himself doing something unusual. He was listening carefully, not just to the words, to the spaces between them, to the way Emmett talked about Vera with something that was bigger than love, a fierce, protective tenderness that Douglas recognized distantly from a time in his own life when he had felt it too, for his own daughter when she was small. He thought of Sylvia, 4 missed calls. He knew why she wasn't returning them. He knew exactly why, even though he had organized an elaborate mental system designed to make himself not know. She had told him last Christmas, sitting in his kitchen in Lake Forest, while he answered emails on his phone, "Dad, I feel like I'm just something on your calendar, something that keeps getting moved." He had told her she was being dramatic. He had not apologized. He looked at Emmett, who had set down his book and was watching the snow that had started to fall outside the tall windows. "It's snowing," the boy said. "I can see that. My grandma hates when it snows because the buses are slow and she has to stand outside." He didn't say it with self-pity. He just said it the way you describe the world, in art class. It's not very straight. I'm sure she wears it. She wears it every day." Emmett's mouth curved slightly, even when it's not cold enough. Douglas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I have a daughter. She's 34. Emmett waited. "We don't." Douglas stopped. Started again. "I wasn't a very good father when she was growing up. I was around, technically, but I wasn't present." He paused. "That's a word people use. I used to think it was therapy speak. Now I think it's just accurate." It was an unusual thing to say. He didn't say things like that. He was already reaching for the internal mechanism that would pull the sentence back, reframe it, offer something deflecting. But Emmett was just looking at him with those direct, dark eyes, and there was something about him that made pretending seem not worth the effort. "Do you want to fix it?" Emmett asked. "I don't know if you can fix something after long enough. My grandma says the only mistake you can't come back from is the one you don't try to fix." He picked up his book again. "She says that a lot." Douglas looked at the snow falling on Michigan Avenue. He thought, I should call Sylvia, not the way he usually thought of it, as a task, an item, something to schedule. He thought, I should call her and tell her she was right. Noon came and went. He canceled on Gerald, which he had never done in 30 years of doing business. He wasn't entirely sure why. He ordered lunch from the hotel kitchen, 2 things, not 1, and came back to the lobby with a bowl of tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich cut into triangles, and he set them down on the small table beside Emmett's chair without announcing them, just placed them there. Emmett looked at the food, then at Douglas, then back at the food. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know, I still have 2 biscuits." "Eat the soup," Douglas said. "It's cold outside." Something shifted in the boy's face, very briefly, the way weather changes over water before it fully arrives. He wasn't going to cry. Douglas could tell he was the kind of boy who had learned to carry things without putting them down. But something had passed through him, some feeling that was too large for the moment and too real to fully hide. He picked up the spoon. "Thank you," he said quietly. They ate in the lobby of the Grand Meridian Hotel while snow came down over Chicago and the pianist played something that neither of them knew the name of. Around 1:30, Emmett said he had to go. He needed to meet his grandmother at the bus stop on Clark because she sometimes had trouble with the ice. He put on his jacket, the too big one. He tucked his library book into the crook of his arm. He picked up the paper bag with the 2 remaining biscuits. He turned to Douglas and put out his hand, very formally. Douglas shook it. "It was nice to meet you," Emmett said. "Likewise." The boy started toward the revolving doors, then stopped. He turned back. "You should call her," he said. "Your daughter." He said it simply, without performance, like reminding someone of something they already knew. "She probably misses you." Then he pushed through the doors and walked out into the snow, his too big jacket and his library book and his paper bag with the 2 biscuits, and he turned left toward the bus stop on Clark without looking back. Douglas stood in the lobby and watched until he couldn't see him anymore. He called Sylvia at 2 o'clock. She picked up on the 3rd ring, which surprised him. He had expected voicemail. He had prepared, somewhat, for voicemail. "Dad." Her voice was careful. The way it got when she was deciding how much to give. "Hi," he said. "I know you've been. I know I've called a lot. You don't have to explain. I just wanted to say something." A pause. "Okay," she said. "I wanted to say that I think you were right. At Christmas. What you said." He stood at the window of his suite, the lake gray and snow dusted below. "You weren't being dramatic. You were telling me the truth, and I told you that you were wrong instead of listening, and I've been thinking about it for almost a year, and I wanted to tell you." He stopped. He was not accustomed to this. "You were right." A long silence. Then Sylvia said, "Dad." Her voice was different, softer, the way it used to sound when she was small and she called him from down the hallway just to know he was there. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I think so." He paused. "I met someone today. A boy. He tried to explain and found it difficult. He gave away his breakfast." "What?" "He had 4 biscuits and he was offering them to strangers." Douglas looked out at the lake. "I don't know. It made me think about things." "What things?" "Whether I've been generous with anything that mattered." Another silence, shorter this time. "I'd like to have lunch," Sylvia said. "When you're back, if you want." "I want," Douglas said. "I very much want." They made a plan. An actual plan, not a vague intention, a specific Sunday, a restaurant she liked in Wicker Park, noon. He wrote it down in his phone and then, not trusting that, he wrote it on the notepad on the hotel desk in his own handwriting. After he hung up, he sat for a long time in the chair by the window. He thought about Emmett and Vera and the crooked scarf worn every day even when it wasn't cold enough. He thought about what it means to have so little and still hold out a paper bag to a stranger. He thought about what it means to have so much and still spend 40 years getting the distance wrong. The next morning, before he checked out, Douglas went to the front desk and spoke with the manager, a calm and efficient woman named Patricia, who listened to him without interrupting, which he appreciated. He explained what he'd like to do. He didn't know the boy's last name. He knew the grandmother's name was Vera, that she worked cleaning offices on the north side, and that the boy went to a school somewhere within walking distance or bus distance of St. Augustine's on Superior Street. Patricia, to her credit, did not look at him as if he were unusual. "I know St. Augustine's," she said. "We donate there at the holidays. There's a woman named Vera who comes to the breakfast line," Douglas said. "Or maybe the boy does, an 11-year-old named Emmett. I'd like to make a contribution in his name, or I'd like to set up something, some kind of fund for the school, or—" He stopped. He was better at executing plans than forming them. "I'd like to do something useful. I don't want it to feel like charity. I just want—" He paused. "He offered me a biscuit," Douglas said. "I'd like to do something with that." Patricia looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up her pen. "Let's figure it out," she said. It took 3 weeks, a lawyer, and a conversation with the director of St. Augustine's Community Center, a brisk, clear-eyed woman named Dory, who had seen every variety of rich person guilt in 20 years of non-profit work and could tell immediately which kind Douglas was. She concluded after 2 meetings and a lot of direct questions that he wasn't guilty so much as altered. "Something happened to you," she said, not unkindly. "A boy offered me a biscuit," Douglas said, "and told me to call my daughter, and did you?" "I did." Dory nodded slowly. "And how'd that go?" "We had lunch on Sunday." He paused. "We talked for 3 hours. She told me about her life." I listened. He looked at his hands. "She showed me pictures of her apartment. She has a cat I didn't know about. His name is Chester." Dory looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Farrow," she said, "I think you know what you want to do. You're just waiting for someone to tell you it's allowed." He looked at her. "It's allowed," she said. What Douglas set up was not complicated, though it took careful architecture. A scholarship fund administered through St. Augustine's for kids in the neighborhood who showed academic promise and whose circumstances made college an abstraction rather than a plan. The kind of kids who read library books about ocean navigation and kept a photograph of their mother in their backpack. He did not put his name on it. He called it the Vera Fund. He never saw Emmett again. He thought about trying to find him, but something told him not to. The boy had not been a problem to solve. He had not needed anything from Douglas, except maybe the soup, which was just decency, which was what you owed a person who was cold. What Emmett had given him, without knowing he was giving it, without asking for anything in return, was the moment of stopping. The 20 minutes of warm. The question, "Do you like it?" that nobody else had thought to ask. The plain-spoken reminder that some things can still be fixed if you're willing to try. The January after that November, Douglas flew to Portland to see Sylvia. He stayed for 5 days. They walked along the waterfront. He met Chester, who was orange and opinionated. He sat in her kitchen while she made coffee, and he didn't look at his phone. On the last morning, she hugged him at the door, a real hug, the held kind, not the two-pat kind that they'd been doing for years, and she said, "I'm glad you called." "Me too," he said. He meant it. Spring came. Chester grew fatter. The Vera Fund granted its first scholarships, 8 of them, to kids whose teachers had written letters describing what it was like to watch a child learn hungrily in a classroom and wonder what would happen to all that brightness. Douglas read every letter twice. One of the recipients, a 12-year-old girl from Pilsen who wanted to be an engineer, had written a short paragraph about her grandmother in her application essay, about how her grandmother had come to Chicago with one suitcase and learned English from television and worked hard at things that didn't suit her because that was what was needed, and how her grandmother believed that you could build a good life from almost nothing if you were willing to be patient and to share what you had. Douglas read the paragraph 4 times. He thought, Emmett would like her. He thought, maybe that's what this is for, to make room for what's already there. He folded the letter. He put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. He walked to the window of his office on the 41st floor of Faro Capital, and the lake lay bright below him now. Not gray but blue, the kind of blue that comes in April when winter finally stops pretending. The most important things he had ever done had not been in any of those boardrooms. He understood that now. He was 61 years old, and he was still learning it, and he thought that was all right. He thought that might be the point. That you kept learning it, that the learning didn't stop, and that sometimes it arrived in a hotel lobby in a paper bag with 4 biscuits wrapped in foil, from a boy in a too-big jacket who had enough to share and knew it.